What's up, guys? I hope that I can even talk over the rain because it's really dumping, and I also hope that it doesn't affect our internet. But I wanted to pop on here and tell you guys a few things. Some of it is, the stuff that I wouldn't really be super interested in communicating to the general public because it's, it just sounds loony. And then also I wanted to let you guys know that I'm gonna start putting bonus material at the end of all my videos, and I do have some backlogged. So when you see the same videos in the Patreon, that's not all I'm gonna put under the Patreon deal, but I just didn't want you guys to fail to notice that they're not the same videos. There's going to be more material and bonus material at the end. The Aleister Crowley one, that's going to be similar to the Timothy Leary video, is probably going to be next. And so this whole New World Order sort of apocalyptic scenario that we're dealing with here, I basically received all of the details and sort of the metaphysical underpinnings that justified it, kind of, or that explained to us why it actually isn't evil, right? And really, if my metaphysical model is correct, there's no such thing as evil in a certain sense. And, I think one of the things that actually keeps us from higher knowledge is that a lot of it is not really palatable from a human sense. It's offensive to our sense of decency, but I think that the physical world is a reflection of this ultimate truth and this ultimate process. And if you just observe what the macrocosm looks like and how it functions, this kind of like all love and light, toxic positivity, sort of the way that spirituality and enlightenment is presented generally in the mainstream and in popular culture clearly is lacking something. And so, I think the trick and the challenge that eludes so many people in terms of being successful at this is to be able to understand what is happening, why it's necessary, without judgment, and also to not allow yourself to be influenced by it. Just because you could be evil doesn't mean that you should be evil. I mean, I think that just based on my observations, a lot of people just seem to be really afraid that things are going to influence them in some way that's not consistent with their concept of who they are and what's okay. And I've never understood that, because I feel like I've encountered all kinds of beings, and I've never really felt like I was in any danger of anything like compelling me to do something that's against my nature. To me, that's just not possible. And so, I would hope that for you guys, if you're really on the search for truth, like legitimate, holistic truth, that you can transcend these biases that actually occult our capacity to have, to make holistic observations about the truth. Let me pull this up on the laptop in case any of you guys end up on and want to interact, because I don't have a chat screen on my phone for some reason. Okay, so, and just to put all that in perspective a little bit, kind of what I'm referencing is the fact that the universe is made of equal and opposite energies that are interacting to produce what we experience. The plane of causality is composed of these opposites interacting, and there's just, as long as we're manifested on this plane, there's really no way around it. I mean, you don't have to agree with it, and it doesn't matter whether you do or not. Evil literally creates good, and good literally creates evil. And so you just kind of have to choose your role knowing that the only way really out of it is, as the Buddha said, was to just sit and to not engage in producing karma in either way. Because whether you're doing good and evil comes from it, or you're doing evil and good comes from it, you're still caught in this cycle of karma. And so that's what this admonition to do nothing comes from. And for most of us, that's just not really feasible. It's not plausible, and it's not what we're going to do. And so, having this knowledge and then choosing how to relate to it is the trick. And so basically, what has happened over the course of my life is that the universe has kind of presented me with the different aspects of, a prophecy, I guess. I mean, like, this is what's going to happen later. And, it's been 100% accurate, which isn't to say that I've known everything in advance, but the things that I have been told have turned out to be true. To a degree that I can no longer have the kind of doubt that I used to wrestle with when I was younger. And the way that it was presented to me is also very interesting. And it's one of the reasons why I talk about not really needing these $4,000 courses and stuff that, a lot of people are falling for out there, because really the universe is the only teacher that you need. I'm here for entertainment purposes, maybe to give you a sense of community, and guidance if I can, but in general, it's the universe that should be your one and only instructor and teacher. And when you allow that to happen, it's marvelously, it's just amazing how it presents itself. And for example, one of the things that would happen is that, like, certain aspects of information would be sort of withheld or occulted from my sight until the moment when they were necessary and applicable, and when it was, it's like when the ears of, what does the Kabbalion say about this? So basically, when the student is ready, the master will appear. And it's the same sort of thing with the universe and giving you this knowledge. And so basically, over time, I was told that it happened. The reason that first let's predicate it with this. What we experience, what we see, I say this a lot, is just really a story that consciousness is draped over these energies that are just canceling each other out, right? The Crowley thing, the equation that explains the universe is 0 equals 2. This duality reducing to nothingness, basically. And so it's just an energetic process, and there's no real moral anything to it, and there's no way around it. There's no avoiding it. It can't be stopped. It can't be outrun. It can't be undone. It is as it is, and it can be no other. But basically, from our point of view, as we relate to history and we relate to the process, it's like the population needed to get way over what is acceptable in order to create the economies, in order to produce the ideas, in order to create the momentum and the physical infrastructure to accelerate the technology and the development of all of the different elements that are going into this process of transition from light and then into matter and then reintegrating back into the light again. And all of these processes, and this is something that I think a lot of people miss, are necessary. This isn't just happening because the universe doesn't have anything else to do. That's a big part of it, I think, but it's also happening because it's absolutely necessary to reconfigure and reformat the basic operating code and the way that the types of energy that exist to be transmuted into higher and higher forms. And we can have the hope that eventually duality will be transcended, but in the meantime, we're always going to be living with equal and opposite a balance of creative and destructive forces. And so the population was allowed to get super massive to drive the machine, to keep everything on track, to to fund the technology, to do all of the shit that needed to happen on the timeline that was required. But then what happens? Once we start to reach what Terence McKenna called the omega point, we no longer need all these houses to be built. Even if the population were to stabilize and stop increasing, we would still not need these massive construction industries and all of the related stuff, like all the plastic crap that was created just to have something to sell in order to generate money to push this whole thing forward. And so as this extraneous population is no longer necessary, it has to be reduced. And so I had some difficulty with accepting that on a bleeding heart liberal level. And so it was also kind of explained to me that the places where they are focusing their depopulation efforts are places where there is fanatical religion, there is starvation and suffering, and that basically what happens is that this consciousness has been spread too thin anyways, and as they sort of reduce the numbers, it sort of concentrates the essence of the soul that is humanity into fewer and fewer people. This is why during ancient Greece, the Plato and Socrates and all of these geniuses, there were so many in such a small population, and it's due to this it's the laws of nature. Every system is subject to the influence of them, the same laws and rules. And so this is how metaphysics is actually applied, that the process of dilution as it relates to like orange juice or a chemical is the same with a population. And so also, density, when you refract light, this is why, diamond sparkles so much more than just a quartz crystal. And so you have this much greater depth and brilliance and beauty that is produced by the refraction of light in a diamond as opposed to quartz crystal. It's about hardness, it's about density. And so the ultimate goal is a very, very small population where everything is automated. We don't have the 9-to-5 slavery. We don't have the suffering and starvation. We have a population that is technologically capable of, existing for the things that really matter, the exploration of music and arts and science and spirituality and all of this stuff, right? So at some point during my particular journey, this element of the star tribes was introduced, where I was told that a lot of people are going to die no matter what I think about it. And at one point it said, we will mop the streets with the guts of the wicked, right? And so I think it was a Hell's Angel that was telling me that, which was really... No, that was an internal voice, but there were a lot of Hell's Angels around, and they were there to serve a symbolic purpose, but that's another story for another time. And so this idea that the star tribes, or some constituency of the star tribes, would actually come and take a butt ton of the really enlightened, chosen people out of here to take them back home or into a fifth dimensional reality. And it sounded like they were saying this is going to be a good thing. The thing is, I don't know if I can trust them or not. But the reality is that since this occurred, I've heard this same story from an awful lot of people. So the only potential explanations that I'm left with is either that it is real, or that it is a trick and those people are actually going to be taken off to hell or something, or that it is some kind of product of the collective unconscious mind, which seemed to be where Terence McKenna was kind of leaning towards with this. But this message is definitely still coming through to people. For me, I think it's been like 20 years or so since I started kind of receiving the plan or whatever. And I got into the back of a taxi the other day with a probably 23-year-old kid, and he started telling me the whole story, the same shit that they told me, you know what I mean? So it's either true or, like I just outlined. So that is an interesting element of it. And so I think, assuming that this story is true, one of the things that I was kind of told is that I would be surprised who they would actually preserve, because if you're growing up in the 80s or the 90s as I was, you wouldn't imagine that the Illuminati or the powers that be would preserve the rebels and the super intelligent, that they would keep the sheep and have a small population that was easy to rule over. And that actually is not consistent with the overarching theme of evolution and life in the universe. So if you actually transcend human politics and think about it from an illuminated point of view, you will keep certain genetic material that actually performs the role that conscious sentient beings are supposed to in the universe, which is that of conscious evolution, of self-exploration and exploration of the universe. And so, as I've said many times before, according to my research and experience in secret societies, and even just reading Adam Weishaupt's personal papers, this is very much consistent with what the Illuminati were about. They were not bad, in my opinion. They were actually here to serve the same purpose that I am right now. They were trying to get rid of religion. They were trying to create a world where people had gnosis as their source of spiritual nourishment, and not religion, and to get rid of all the borders so that there would be no more war. And if you read Adam Weishaupt's personal papers, it sounds like just the plan that any kind of enlightened person that has taken psychedelics would enact if it was up to them to rule the planet. I think that it's also very likely that the Illuminati are real, and that is kind of their role, and that is actually what they're pulling off. And I think if it wasn't true, they would have already just culled the herd. There's really nothing stopping them other than the fact that they have to allow these people to evolve in order to have this utopia with the select personages that will actually make it. And if you think about it, they do have complete control over the information. And yet those of us that want to know what's going on to the extent that we can preserve ourselves have access to everything that we need to know. And if there weren't very, very powerful influences that didn't want that to be the case, it would not be the case. Everything would be hidden from us. And so if you have the intelligence and the enlightenment to notice what's going on, and you know that you need to avoid GMOs, and you know that you need to avoid the vaccination, and you know that you need to avoid certain places, and you know you need to eat organic food and take psychedelics and make a lot of money, and all of the stuff that is kind of like a prerequisite for making it through the transition to the new world, then you will indeed survive. And that is how you were selected. And it's not really this like totally cruel, unfair process. It's just like if your job is to manage the evolution of a population, and you are dealing with certain criteria and certain circumstances, what are you going to do when you're confronted with the fact that if you don't drastically reduce the population, you're going to have the total annihilation of all life on that planet? And if you are going to preserve some select demographic, it had better be the ones that are the most conscious, the most evolved, the most intelligent, the most creative, because your utopia will not even be able to survive without it. And you can look at it from that point of view too. If you're really an illuminated, enlightened elite, and that's the truth, it may not seem like it, but you guys have to remember that all of these sages and prophets and shit that told you that things would not be what they seem, and that you wouldn't understand the parables and all of this other shit, they were right. And so the truth is very subtle, and it takes a very sort of adept consciousness to see it. But I think that this is what's going on, and this is where we're heading. And so it's really the only way to make sense of it all. And I really just don't think that the universe is just doing this sort of random gobbledygook bullshit that a lot of people do, and obviously it's not a sky god managing it all. I think that this idea that we're headed for massive chaos in order for a new order to arise, but that the new order is not going to be a bunch of AI slaves, because the universe is what's in charge. And what the universe does is it produces novelty. And it is not going to engineer circumstances so that that production of novelty is limited in the sentient beings that are there to produce it. It just doesn't make sense. And so if you look at the scenario that I've just painted, even though there are some painful spots in it, it actually does sound like it's consistent with the general gestalt of life and consciousness. And I hope that helps. This was a relatively brief secret stream. I've just been super busy, and I'm really going to dive back in, because I'm noticing, for example, that a lot of the stuff that was really making people hate me last year or 2020 when I was talking about it, now those videos are blowing up, and it's starting to look like maybe people are ready to hear the shit that I'm trying to tell them. And I think it's very likely true. You know, it's crazy, but you know, if you just look around the universe and consider the fact that this has already happened, implausibility is no longer a factor that will disqualify a sequence of events or some potentiality. So thank you guys again so much for your support. Keep an eye out for the Aleister Crowley video, and remember, the stuff that I post on the Patreon page is going to be different, even if the thumbnail is the same for the video. So thanks again so much, and we'll see you guys again very soon.